Shalom, this is Avraham Shira from Eretz Israel. Welcome to our Erev Shabbat talk. You know, it occurred to me this week, this exercise of scholarship, a lot of it is defining terms. A lot of it is how we define the terms that we use to describe ourselves, to describe reality. And so it's like, what kind of hammer are you using for the job, to drive the nail? Is it a little hammer? Is it a big hammer? The tools are oftentimes, they need to be very precise to the type of job that we need to do. And so that also takes place in our definition of terms. What is a tzaddik? What is about Teshuva? What is a child that was kidnapped? And, well, all of that, what's it connected to Shabbat? Well, the Shabbos, the rabbis teach us that Shabbat, one of the ways that you can understand the concept of Shabbat is the way you spell or split the word, because shin bet is shav, return, taf. So returning the taf is one of the big picture paradigms of repairing creation. See, because we know that when Cain killed his brother, and he was doing it because he wanted his brother's wife, when that happened, God put a taf, the letter taf, the last letter in the alphabet, the signifier of pure judgment without mercy. He put that on Cain's forehead because when Cain killed his brother, he left the human plane and entered the animal plane. And when he entered the animal plane, all the other animals said, oh, there's something new to eat. Somebody's new in the market. And so Cain was in trouble, and God didn't want Cain to die because God knew that Cain would return and do Teshuva as best he could. And because also he represented, half of the part of the regeneration of the human species. So Cain got this tuf on his forehead, and it represented to the rest of the creation that he was not an animal, yet he was a human being who had fallen, and he would have to do the shav part of the tuf, to return the tuf into kedusha, into holiness. And that is Shabbat. So our whole week is this effort to get back to Shabbat, to get back into the holiness, to get out of all this materialism and enter some spiritual peace and blessing and appreciation and gratitude and feeling good about being on this whirling globe of contradictions and paradox. So when we understand Shabbat, we're going to apply this concept now of returning the taf to the tzaddik, the Baal Teshuva, and the tinok shenishba, as it's called in Hebrew, the child that was kidnapped. The tzaddik is a person classically defined as someone who never sinned. And of course, the Torah tells us there is nobody that never sinned. Even Moses, the highest prophet, had what was called a sin because he got angry at the hecklers, the Erev Rav, the mixed multitude that was heckling him all the way throughout the 40 years in the desert. He had this gang of half-Jews, non-Jews, etc., who were heckling Moses, even though he was doing all the miracles and, saving us from the Egyptians. Nonetheless, the idea of the tzaddik is classically someone who has not sinned. But we should have in parentheses, remember what the Rambam writes, that a tzaddik is anyone who has 51% more good deeds than bad deeds. 1% changes your category. 1% makes you from a question mark into the label tzaddik. So you see, terms, how we define our terms. In some groups, the tzaddik is only one tzaddik, the leader of the group, the leader of the generation. And in other groups, the tzaddik is someone who does good deeds and has a good heart and wants to improve the world and life around him. So, there are many, again, always be aware of how you use terms and how the terms are received by your listeners. And so the Rambam's definition is very broad, and it kind of makes you feel good. Oh, I just need 51% good deeds. And the Rambam say I was a tzaddik. And if I go over to my friends in Chabad, they would say, no, you don't worry about being a tzaddik. Be a Benoni and you're good enough, because there's only one tzaddik in a generation. So between those two extremes, we exist in the world of definitions. Of course, definitions are only handles for us to understand things. Now we move on to the Baal Teshuva. The Baal Teshuva, classically, it's not someone who used to be, a bartender in New Orleans. Well, like yours truly, 35 years ago. Shalom. Hi, Hillary. How you doing? Welcome. So 35 years ago, I didn't know anything about religion. Then I came back and people said, oh, you're about Teshuva. And then I realized, no, I'm not about Teshuva. The terms changed. The definitions shifted. About Teshuva is someone who was born and raised religious, who left the religion. He left the mitzvot. This is too much for me. I'm on the run. Right? I don't want to be religious anymore. And he goes out in the world and he tastes the material world. And he tastes the world without Torah and mitzvot. No Shabbat, no kashrut, and a lot of other things. And he decides, you know what? I don't like this any better than, I think I'll go back and be religious again. Because at least over there I had some structure to life. Some vision, a goal, a purpose that the Torah gives us about repair of the world, the redemption of humanity, the arrival of a messianic age. Those concepts are very big and they help give focus to a ship that doesn't have a rudder. So that's about Teshuva, someone who was religious, who left and decides to come back. Now that person, when he comes back to religion, he knows what he's getting back into. He knows that he's going to have to get up at this time and go to the synagogue and put on tefillin, and he can't eat cheeseburgers anymore, and he has to marry a Jewish woman, and all these other restrictions. But of course, the religion is not really about restrictions. The restrictions are only given to us to keep us focused on the goal. And it's a much bigger goal than we understand in our physical bodies. We don't even have the tools to measure the spiritual realm. Unless we do the work of purifying ourselves, and then we can start to measure a little bit about what's beyond the soul, and beyond the grave, and beyond the body, and beyond the physical realm. Okay, so that's about Teshuva, is somebody who actually went back to where he was, and he doesn't go back the same way as a Tinok Shenishba. The third category the rabbis use in the Talmud are people who never had religion, they never had mitzvot, they were never raised with an orthodox worldview. They might have been raised Reform, and they did certain mitzvot along the way, but it was never really explained. I mean, I was a conservative Jew, but I didn't really know what it was, except you're 13, you read from the Torah, you have a party, and everybody sends you, some kind of paper gift, right? So, it was very limited. And the day after I was bar mitzvah, I didn't know what to do. And I left it. Didn't know anything, because I didn't have a real Torah education. So a Tinok Shenishba is a person who never really had religion. And the concept of a kidnapped person becoming freed, listen to it closely. If you get kidnapped and you're put in a dungeon somewhere, you're held in a ship, you're locked up in a cell by your kidnappers, life is not looking too good. And suddenly you're freed. And suddenly you're out of prison, you're out of jail, you're out of your kidnapper's grasp. You're back to a whole new life. I'm freed from the external forces. I'm freed from all the lust and desire and acquisitiveness and, the things that make the material world a very heavy place to live, because there's these physical demands all the time. And the push to always get more money, more cars, more houses, more prestige, more fame, more, all that more. This, the sages say, is really not from the right side. It's not from the holiness. Our goal here is not to accumulate as many goods as we can and then go into our coffin and say goodbye to all our acquisitions. No, the Tinok Shenishba, the kidnapped child, is the one who suddenly is free from the past and starts a completely new life. And he discovers the Torah. He discovers the Kabbalah. He discovers meditation. He discovers the gifts that are hidden beneath the letters and the words and the verses and the chapters of the Torah and the Talmud and the Zohar and all of the mystical books. And, there are 100,000 books minimum. I know there's 100,000 books on HebrewBooks.com. You can go, there's endless amounts of spiritual inquiry. Because in the discipline of Kabbalah, for example, you have Kabbalistic astrology, reading of palms, reading of faces, reading of foreheads. Everything that you have in the external world of mysticism, you have in Kabbalah, but it's sanctified and it's very old. So it has a lot of understanding behind it, and it's not like a new age mystical discovery. It's something that people have known about a long time, including black magic, white magic, dealing with spiritual forces, entities. It's a very big picture once you get beneath the surface. So the Tinok Shenishba, he's like thrilled to come back to something he never had. You see, it's completely different than the Baal Tshuva, who comes back to something he had and he left and he came back. Because someone who is kidnapped and then discovers the kingdom, he's always got this kind of smile, this twinkle in the eye, this love of something new that I never knew was there. And that's the discovery of Judaism itself. That's the discovery of God is not out there somewhere in heaven. He's in my heart. And if I'm lucky, I can hear him whisper. And he's in the mitzvot. And he's in the Eretz Israel. And he's in Jerusalem. And it's layer upon layer upon layer of sensitivity. And so as we refine ourselves, we pick up more information. And you're like, you see that we're like these little spiritual satellites flying around, the upper atmosphere, and we're picking up information. And the more that we work to purify and to sanctify, the more we're able to experience the transcendental. And it's not a trip or a high or a dose of mushrooms or LSD. It's something that you don't come back feeling, bad, like I got to go to the hospital after a 12-hour trip. You come back and you're totally better. You're renewed without all the negative side effects. And why do people do drugs? Because they want to be free of their bodies. And the Torah says, don't be free by external substances. Get free by your relationship to the one that's already free inside you. And the Torah and Pirkei Avot says, Ein ben chorim ele ben Torah. The only people who are truly free are the ones who have the Torah, because the guidance systems of the mitzvot help us direct the mind and the heart to the journey that we want to make, which is the journey to be attached to the infinite, to be attached to everything from the side of holiness and not the external forces. So you see, you have the tzaddik, he never tasted sin. He's there by virtue probably of coming from a holy family and maybe holy grandparents and great-grandparents, and who knows what merit lies behind the soul of someone who never tastes the forbidden fruit. Now, there are souls that never even tasted the fruit that Adam and Eve, that mystical fruit that is the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, but that knowledge is really the idea of duality. There are people that never tasted the idea of you and me, us and them. They only see one, because it really is only one. And our mind is a filter that creates the duality. But when we clean the filter, guess what? We start to see the one. And then we can accept life, and we can accept our suffering, we can accept our mistakes, we can accept our bad choices, we can accept the world as it is, we can accept COVID. If you have to, go imagine. You can even accept things as terrible as the Holocaust, because it was all prophesied from the beginning, if you know where to look. And Moses, gave us the outline, the map of history that would come in the future. So, again, we started out with this idea of defining our terms, and this idea of Shabbat is returning the tough, returning the curse of Cain, the curse of bloodshed, the curse of wanting somebody else's something. That's a curse if you want somebody else's wife or somebody else's car or somebody else's house. You're jealous of their achievements. That's a curse, because I can't be me. And not only can I not be me, I can't be happy being me. So, we want to bring that tough back. We want to turn Shav into Shabbat, right? We want to turn it into the time of rest and joy and gratitude, which it really is. We just have to leave the weekday beside, and drop it all and end the games and the shtick, as it's called in Yiddish. When we're not really ourselves, we're being something else for somebody else. You're being somebody else for your boss, and somebody else for your wife, and somebody else for your rabbi. When am I myself? Because that's where the real joy is. That's where the love is. That's where the presence is. So God bless you all with that experience of the Shabbat, the experience of the oneness that underlies all the multiplicity. And we'll see you next week on all the outlets, platforms, and well, we'll continue the journey because that's what we got, and it's a good one, and it's going to end very well. God bless you all. Shabbat shalom.